Good morning, everyone. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing His Excellency Ambassador Denis Francis, a seasoned diplomat from my own part of the world, Latin America and the Caribbean. He is the president of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. It is a pleasure to have you address this 11th Baku Forum, Ambassador Denis Francis. He has 40-year experience in the diplomatic service of Trinidad and Tobago. For 18 of those years of unbroken service, he held the rank of ambassador. According to Mr. Francis, he has the distinction of being his country's longest-serving ambassador. He was the Director of Multilateral Affairs, Senior Advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs on multilateral matters, including climate change and the negotiations of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Ambassador Francis was permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, to the World Trade Organizations and the UN Human Rights Council, and ambassador to the United Nations in New York. He was accredited to the UN specialized agencies in Vienna and Rome, and accredited as ambassador to Austria and Italy. Ambassador Francis was also permanent delegate to UNESCO. In addition, Ambassador Francis had many important bilateral assignments to Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Cuba. He graduated from the School of Advanced International Studies at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Francis has the very difficult and delicate task of leading the world of the UN most representative body, the Parliament of Nations, at times of great hardship, in times of mistrust, disinformation, and political confrontation. And he's leading the charge with extraordinary competence, diplomatic wisdom, and a clear sense of service to the cause of peace, equity, justice, human dignity, and environmental integrity. Without further ado, I now give the floor to His Excellency, the President of the UN General Assembly. And before I invite His Excellency to come to the podium, I have to say that he's in very good company. There are eight former UN presidents of the General Assembly just to escort His Excellency while he delivers his speech. Welcome to the podium, Ambassador Francis.
Your Excellency, Ms. Vaira Vic Friberger and Ms. Ismail Serajeldin, co-chairs of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I should like to thank my predecessor, Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, President of the UN General Assembly for the 73rd session, for her kind words of introduction and welcome to this exceptional assemblage of global thought leaders. I also wish to express my gratitude to the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, and in particular to its Secretary General, Mr. Rovshan Muradov, for the invitation to join you here today and to deliver a keynote address. And allow me the opportunity to commend His Excellency, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, for his enduring commitment to promoting dialogue, tolerance, and multiculturalism, which of course provides the intellectual foundation for the convening of the Global Baku Forum for the 11th year. The sheer numbers of leaders, Nobel laureates, entrepreneurs, heads of international organizations, and other critical thinkers who gather here annually, motivated by the mission to advance broad, constructive dialogue on the complex challenges of our time, speaks volumes about the convening power of Nizami Ganjavi International Center in arranging this esteemed convocation. This year's theme, Fixing the Fractured World, is particularly noteworthy given the very apt manner in which it captures the essential challenge of our time. Indeed, as we aim to fix the fractured world, the International Center's ideals, those of the great poet Nizami Ganjavi, of learning, tolerance, dialogue, and understanding, should be at the very core of our collective toolkit and strategy to repair and indeed regain the effective balance and stability of our systems of global governance. Ladies and gentlemen, as conflicts multiply and tensions boil over across the world, our multilateral system has come under extraordinary and deepening strain, unlike anything we have seen in the past. It is fair to say that we are careening towards breaking point. Geopolitical fractures have damaged trust, eroded respect for international law, and risk widening into dangerous, irreversible chasms if left unaddressed. The United Nations General Assembly, often referred to as the Parliament of the world, has not been immune from these fissures. This is why I chose the 4 watchwords of peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all to guide my presidency of the General Assembly. Peace, because it is the very foundation on which everything else is built, but which has become in short supply and is now the central focus of our work in the 78th session. When present, peace is the great enabler of a bright future, but when absent, it becomes the great destroyer of dreams and aspirations, and, unfortunate though it is, goodwill. Prosperity, because even though we live in a world of plenty, plenty is certainly not equally enjoyed. On the contrary, millions of people, especially women and children, are left out and left behind, languishing in multidimensional abject poverty. Progress, because we need it across the board, from realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and advancing gender equality to reforming the unjust financial architecture that discriminates against and unfairly disadvantages countries and communities in the global south, and which can no longer meet the sustainable development demands of a 21st century world. And sustainability, because all our efforts will be in vain if they cannot stand the test of time and the strains of human civilization to meet the needs of succeeding generations. While these priorities are broad, in the General Assembly, we are drilling down into each, convening formally and informally, strengthening relations across the principal organs of the United Nations, bringing diverse external voices into our deliberations, and demonstrating to one of our key constituencies, the public, that the United Nations has both the capacity and indeed the will to rethink its methods and to act as one. This is not by any means flashy, headline-grabbing work, but it is worthy and necessary to bring about innovations for member states and to fortify our collective efforts to mend unity of purpose as the only credible basis upon which to resolve the complex polycrises that currently confound us. Excellencies, mend we must from the systematic denial of the fundamental rights of women and girls in Afghanistan to the cascade of military coups across West Africa, the flagrant wartime commission of violation of international human rights law and international humanitarian law in Ukraine and in Gaza, and in rampant gang violence that has descended anarchy upon the streets of Haiti. World events are pushing the multilateral system to the brink in ways not seen in decades. Perhaps no two major conflicts capture this grim reality more viscerally than the aggression against Ukraine and the devastating escalation of violence in the Middle East, in Gaza, sparked by the attack on the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of a UN member state. Regrettably, the war against Ukraine has entered its third bloody year. The targeting of homes, schools, hospitals, ports, and historic cultural sites, and regular bombardment of power and water infrastructure have not only brought horrific suffering and destruction to Ukraine, but unleashed energy and food crises across the globe, leaving millions bereft of vital services and resources they acutely need to survive. In Gaza, the unbearable humanitarian catastrophe continues to worsen amid searing accounts of preventable civilian deaths from famine, exposure, disease, or the shocking misfortune of being caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The staggering death toll of over 31,000 civilian lives lost since October 7th stands as a stark reminder of the unthinkable horrors of this senseless war and demands that we redouble our efforts towards peace, including compelling urgency of finding a formula to agree, at least, to an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Dear friends, in both cases, the Security Council, which bears primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, has failed to discharge its duty to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. In those circumstances, eager to act to save lives, member states have frequently turned to the General Assembly to lead in condemning the assault on peace and on the Charter, as well as demanding compliance with international law. The Assembly's response has been characterized by both alacrity and ambition, convening emergency special sessions that have yielded clear and decisive outcomes. In the case of Ukraine, the Assembly has to date adopted 6 resolutions since March 2022, condemning the aggression, demanding that the Russian Federation withdraw all its forces from the territory of Ukraine, and calling for respect for international humanitarian law and the establishment of accountability mechanisms. In the case of Gaza, it was unequivocally demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and urgently called on all parties to uphold international law, to protect civilians, release all hostages unconditionally, and to ensure the unimpeded access of life-saving humanitarian aid. To be clear, the Assembly demands represent the compelling will of the international community, and I reassert them here forcefully, without reservation. Excellencies, dear colleagues, As global leaders, I implore you to use your influence and your vast networks to help in giving life to these critical demands that constitute the conscience of humanity. I should like to acknowledge among us here today 7 of my predecessors whose support for the role and effectiveness of the office of President of the General Assembly has never dwindled and has accordingly been a source of great encouragement to me. I also would like to recognize the government of Azerbaijan for its exceptional contributions to building a more effective multilateralism as the successful chair of the non-aligned movement over the last 5 years. Azerbaijan's achievements in founding the NAM Youth Organization, the NAM Women's Platform, and the NAM Parliamentary Network in particular reflect the desired, inspired leadership necessary to positively shape global relations for years to come. And the entire General Assembly stands behind me in enthusiastically welcoming the resumption of negotiations, the latest meetings of the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia in Munich, followed by the foreign ministers' meeting in Berlin. I commend the leadership of both countries for making strides to foster peace and security, and express the Assembly's hope for further progress towards a durable peace codified in a peace treaty in line with the norms and principles of international law. Excellencies, our ability to usher in a more just and equitable future will hinge on how well we repair the damage inflicted by the divisive dynamics scarring our politics and societies today. There are several opportunities to harness just that in 2024. A critical moment will arrive in September with the Summit of the Future, where world leaders are expected to forge a new global consensus on how to strengthen the multilateral system, fast-tracking the SDGs, redressing governance gaps, and importantly, holding member states more accountable to their commitments. The summit will serve not as an endpoint, but rather as a catalyst for transformation across the UN system and across the sustainable development paradigm. I encourage governments not only to participate actively and constructively, but to recognize its significance as an opportune moment to prioritize compromise in the interest of the international community as a whole over narrow national interest. As President of the General Assembly, I will continue to do my utmost to support achieving a robust Pact of the Future, and, if intergovernmentally agreed, a global digital compact and a declaration on future generations as the summit's anticipated outcomes in September. This includes hosting the General Assembly's first ever Sustainability Week from the 15th to the 19th of April in New York as an important stepping stone on the path to September. The week will feature a series of high-level events emphasizing sustainability in infrastructure, tourism, energy, and transport, as well as my flagship event on debt sustainability as a major systemic inhibitor of sustainable development to many countries in the South. Another significant opportunity to promote unity will be COP29 here in Baku. In this regard, the announced commitment to support Mission 1.5 degrees centigrade by the troika of COP presidencies, that is, the United Arab Emirates, Azerbaijan, and Brazil, is precisely the type of leadership we need to spark transformation. In this context, I am pleased that the General Assembly in February authorize the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction and the UN Office for Project Services to co-host the Loss and Damage Fund Secretariat. This represents a significant milestone. It is my fervent hope that COP29 will motivate the fund's continued capitalization, including through pledges similar to those made during COP28 presidency by Germany, the UAE, and others. We all look toward COP29 to deliver a series of ambitious climate action commitments, as well as to strengthen the path to the 1.5-degree target and to accelerate adaptation measures and financing to support frontline communities. To succeed, given the times in which we are living, it must be said explicitly that we must staunchly commit to upholding and defending fundamental human rights and gender equality. For both strategic and practical reasons, we must equally empower young people to speak up and to speak out on issues that will ultimately affect their future. I applaud the Global Baku Forum for including the Youth Speak, We Listen event in its program, and I eagerly await the outcomes of its session tomorrow. Excellencies, Nizami Ganjavi himself reminds us that, and I quote, "What we are and what we possess is but a loan. We all share a duty. It is a duty of hope about the future and of optimism for what we can achieve working together in common cause. A duty to walk this wondrous planet with light feet and an opened mind, awake to the reality that peace will enable the ambitious outcomes we seek, and that human dignity is inherent in us all. So many observers have sounded the death knell at the UN's door, yet humanity's resolve and collective commitment to the principles and purposes of the UN Charter have always prevailed. As someone who prefers action to inertia, I, for one, am restless. I urge you to be restless as well, but eager to contribute to the search for solutions to the myriad of challenges confronting us, and to challenge governments, domestic audiences, the media, advisors, and your mindsets to ensure that the Pact of the Future lives up to its name and that COP29 is known for the transformations we need to bring about a truly just transition and a more resilient tomorrow. To prioritize informed collective action over narrow national interest. To foster sustainable peace in Ukraine, the Middle East, and indeed across the world. To recommit to champion all efforts in this direction, and to keep my door open to any and all who seek constructive dialogue. Allow me to end, once again, by expressing my appreciation to the government and people of Azerbaijan for the hospitality extended to me and my delegation, and to thank you all for the opportunity to join this important conversation. I thank you.
What is the advice of a psychologist to a hurdler? Try not to fall over the hurdle? No, never. The advice is, imagine yourself reaching the goal as quickly and safely as possible. So the task is, imagine yourself making COP29 a big success for global environmental policy. Welcome to the panel, Good Words to Good Deeds. What objectives can be set for COP29?
Good morning, everyone. Esteemed colleagues, so good to see you here this morning. I see so many familiar faces, which is great, but even more importantly, I see many unfamiliar faces, which is a testament to our chairs of NGIC's desire to expand the Baku Forum and its increasing relevance. So welcome. I also know that everyone enjoyed dinner last night. It was a late night, so double kudos for being in the audience. We're missing right now Minister Soltanov, but I know he's here. I talked with him early, so as soon as he walks in, we'll all applaud him as we escort him to his chair, but we're going to get started anyway. From my perspective, COP29 is the crescendo of a series of COP meetings, and this is then Azerbaijan's chance to show the world climate leadership. And this panel is designed to facilitate that discussion. Now, we have 9 panelists and we have 90 minutes. You can do the math. It's a challenge. So I'm going to be very diligent about timelines, and I'm going to be rather ruthless, but lovingly ruthless. So when I cut you off, know that I am giving you a hug at the same time. All right, so that I will be lovingly ruthless about cutting people off. I will say, however, I grew up and many people have said to me, if you have anything important to say, you can say it in 2.5 minutes. I'm just saying, if you got anything important to say, you can say it in 2.5 minutes. So I think that's sort of a rule to live by. I'm going to just introduce people real quickly. I think I totaled up 160 years of experience in the climate fight on this panel. We have bold voices, bright voices, and I want every single one of them to have the opportunity to speak. What's missing on my little piece is I was over 30 years with ExxonMobil as a vice president at ExxonMobil. I have now spent the last 10 years on a green energy, a green metals, and a green technology company, as well as being my great privilege to be on the board of NGIC. So we have Achim Steiner, who flew in for today, many years of experience, the administrator of, please join us, no problem. Glad you're here. Administrator of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Thank you so much. We have Minister Soltanov. We were on a panel over the past few years. We're really privileged to have you here. Congratulations on being the CEO of COP29. That's a really important role, and Deputy Minister of Energy, so thank you for being here. Sir Sharma, member of the Parliament of the UK, also president of COP26. So really important, again, a lot of experience. And you can see how I got to 160 to 200 years of climate exposure. Fatou has incredible experience on partnerships, so a really important piece of how we can accomplish climate change initiatives. I think everybody knows Maria. Spent a lot of time on climate-related issues and was president of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly, as well as ministers of several areas in Ecuador. And Mamuna, my BFF, she has done some great work on cities and local communities. Hakima, I know she's around. I hope she's going to attend. She's an important part of this as well. Well, hopefully, and I know she was co-president of Paris, so has a lot to say. And Francesco, as the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, is in the heart and soul of action that has to happen to make this all work. So I just wanted, I know it's written down, but I wanted to put names to faces. This is an incredible group. Now, the agenda for the next 87 minutes, I'm going to make a few comments so you understand my biases. Then I'm going to turn it over to Achim, who's going to give us a framework for our discussion today as well. And then we're going to have 5 people talk about the hows and some of the challenges and obstacles that we face. And then I'm going to have Sir Sharma and the minister in the cleanup batting order. Sorry to use an American sports analogy, but that's the most esteemed role to play, is the cleanup hitter in the batting order. So With that, let me just start. I've got 5 top-line issues, 5 top-line messages from my perspective. 1, COP matters, and no COP will be more consequential than the COP29 coming up. I know it's a highly imperfect, frustrating process, and much of our discussion today will be about the challenges of delivering meaningful collective action. But I really wanted to start this panel by reminding ourselves of what has been achieved. The world is undoubtedly on a better trajectory than was the case before the Paris Agreement and has reached unprecedented consensus on the need for high climate ambition and high climate action. So COP matters, but number 2, incrementalism has its limits and we must think big. So those who say COP has delivered too little, too late, are also right. We all know that the world is way off track to the 1.5 degrees Celsius, and last year the UN Environmental Program said we're headed to 2.9 degrees. That means that we have our foot on the carbon accelerator. Every one of us has our foot on the carbon accelerator. 3, we must build on the progress of COP28. COP28 may have recognized for the first time the need to transition away from fossil fuel in a just, orderly, and equitable manner. And both of those are important, the transition and the just manner. But the fossil elephant, look around, is in the room because we still haven't reached consensus on the need to phase out oil, gas, and coal and set a timeline. And if you look at the incentives, the subsidies are still in the trillions of dollars for oil and gas. 4, we can't wait for a silver bullet. We must act with what we have now. I've heard many people, and this could be indeed an existential risk, that the world avoids the action we need to take now because something will happen down the road. Technology will exist, and we don't have to move now. Technology is important. We have to invest in it. We have to share it, but we need to act now. And then finally, from my vantage point, 2035 targets that we set will be our last stand. So a huge amount rests on COP29. I've heard people say that we're on the road to COP30. COP29 is it, to me. It's extremely key. It's a point of no return. And this is then Azerbaijan's chance to really show the world leadership. The right time, the right place, the right partners. Azerbaijan is steeped in oil and gas, but steeped in a commitment to develop huge renewable resources. So the key is how we take action. Hi, Achim. So with that, Achim, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jean. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to this wonderful, distinguished panel. In 2.5 minutes, maybe you'll give me 3, just a little bit of framing. And I want to pick up where our President of the General Assembly just left off. A world disrupted, a world disturbed, a world searching for at least shared interests where it can still act. And I want to begin by saying, in fact, climate change is one of those areas. We are going to be meeting later this year here in Azerbaijan for the 29th Conference of the Parties. To anybody who, over the many years, has doubted whether this climate change convention, whose beginnings go back to 1992 and the Rio Earth Summit, would not help the world to come together, clearly has been proven wrong 28 times already. Now, as you said just now, Jean, yes, progress has been slow, but it is because the world is struggling to come to agreement with each other, not because of the instrument of the convention and all the COPs. Just look at what happened between Sharm el-Sheikh and Dubai. Less than 10 months, and a new fund was established, and many other decisions were taken. The other ingenious part, I think, of the way that multilateralism has enabled the world to deal with another dilemma was the Paris Agreement's ratcheting up mechanism. When the world met in 2015 in Paris, there was no way that we could close the gap between where the science was telling us we needed to be and where reality was allowing us to reach an agreement. There, we gave birth to the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, to be reviewed and revised every 5 years in order to raise the level of ambition. Sir Alok Sharma is sitting with us here this morning. In Glasgow, we managed already to do something that proves that this mechanism is working, because in Paris, we were at a 3.5 degree world. The NDCs that were submitted towards Glasgow already took us down to a 2.5 to 2.8 degree world. And I think as we look forward to both the COP here in Azerbaijan and then COP30, the next 18 months will be the next test of whether the NDCs, defined by national priorities, realities, but committed to the collective and shared objective of addressing climate change, could in fact end up with a scenario where 1.5 degrees is actually something that you could arrive at if you add them all up. Here comes the second point. Financing, very much at the center also of COP29. The so-called, and I always have to look at it because one of the things with COPs is they create these terrible terminologies. A new collective quantified goal. It's another way of saying the $100 billion, frankly, have not been reached yet, but they were never the ceiling. They were not even the floor, but we are struggling to get on top of that. We need to find a better way in which to address the issue of financing, of investing and investing together in scaled-up ambition. Again, the NDCs are an excellent way in which to define financing needs, opportunities that each country can bring to the table and that the world as a whole can then look at and assess, because a 1.5 degree scenario with all the NDCs on the table by Brazil is not inconceivable, but in it will be a very clear calculation of what it would take to invest domestically, internationally. So financing remains really the key enabler or paralyzer of collective action. And that is why the COP here in Azerbaijan later this year is so critical, because if we do not advance on this collective quantified goal, then indeed we will probably undermine the confidence in the NDCs being developed in an ambitious way. And thirdly and finally, let us also recognize that as we meet here in the year 2024, we live in a world where essentially a transition in the energy revolution, in the decarbonization pathways are happening. Climate action has converged with national sustainable development pathways. There are a number of countries who already today produce most of their electricity, in fact above 90%, with renewables, with clean energy. Uruguay, Kenya. We have seen Europe and the European Parliament now commit legally to a close to 90% emission reduction target by 2040. We have the Inflation Reduction Act. We have China's massive investments, India's investments. The energy transition has gathered so much pace that last year we invested a total of $1.8 trillion. My dear friend at the end of the podium will no doubt speak to that in a moment. And let me therefore say, when we look at this long-standing dilemma that the future success of economies and nations is in part compromised by having to act on climate change and decarbonization, is increasingly becoming a less and less absolute hindrance. On the contrary, any economy thinking into the future today, and we saw that also in the United Arab Emirates, we are looking forward in the work that also we with UNDP are doing here in Azerbaijan on low emissions development strategies, on adaptation plans, the forward-looking view of acting on climate change with ambition and the notion of transition at the center is increasingly at the center of actually thinking about positive futures for economic development. So let me stop here, Gina. I think these are three ways in which I think we can inject a degree of optimism in a moment in time when the world really is struggling to come together. Climate change is existential, it is happening everywhere, and it requires everyone to come to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to Fatou, coming to you next, just let me ask you a quick question. This nexus between climate and development has been a big issue that continues to come up. Can you talk for just a minute about the blockers of that working together, that nexus, because I think it's so important?
Well, first of all, there were the real challenges of sometimes the cost. If you go back 20, 30 years, yes, investing in renewable energy was more costly per kilowatt hour. But that was because the cost of producing electricity with fossil fuels was not fully priced. In today's world, in most economies, we have overcome that. Renewables are per kilowatt hour in most countries now probably the cheapest, if not almost the cheapest option. So the economics is out of the way. Technology is advancing enormously fast. The idea that a country like Germany would be producing 50% of its electricity with renewables, Denmark coming close to 70%, 10 years ago was viewed as technologically impossible. The lights would go out. Today we are seeing enormous advances in terms of storage, in terms of grids that are operated over vast distances, therefore compensating also in terms of variability. There are still breakthroughs needed, but as I said, there are countries that have chosen to invest in this field because it provides enormous opportunity. And I'll end with one more example. In Namibia today, a small country, but with enormous potential, you're seeing green hydrogen emerge, not only as a way of utilizing its almost endless potential of renewable energy, but as an export industry, as a way of financing its own power supply, creating more energy security, potentially creating thousands of new jobs and technological opportunities. So the idea that investing in a decarbonization pathway is going to take you backwards is today truly a mythology. Now, I'm saying this very conscious of the fact that we are in Azerbaijan, and there clearly is still a big question. How do countries and economies that have grown around their ability to supply the world with fossil fuels transition in this age? And I think hopefully the panel this morning will shed a little bit more light on this. But I think human history has shown that just because we had something in the past, there is no reason to assume that this is the pathway to the future. And I think this is the particular moment in which, again, the world has to work together. Energy security is more than just one person having a certain fuel or energy source and others having to purchase it. We are moving into an entirely different world, and it's going to happen over the next 10 years.
Excellent, excellent comments. Fatou, I'm coming to you. You have such a powerful and interesting background on partnerships and trying to make them work. Could you share with us what partnerships are going to be really key to COP29, to getting climate change under control?
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here, to be part of this conversation on behalf of UNIDO. UNIDO is a specialized agency of the UN system in charge of inclusive and sustainable industrialization. Back in the day, industry was seen as a polluter. Today, I can say that industry is provider of solution, technological solution. Industry is providing green jobs, and industry is also providing good practices. So in that sense, I would say that industry is a part of the strategy for climate change, if you want to tackle climate change. For us at UNIDO, if we have the right approaches, industry can be a solution to climate change. It could be a driver for low emission economies. For that, let me refer to 3 key enablers to make that happen. We need future-oriented industrial policies. We need innovation and technology. And we also need capacity building to strengthen the institutions. Of course, I don't want us to forget that we need financing for transition. I was very happy to hear that climate finance will be a major topic and deliverable at COP29. Of course, we'll be happy to join the discussions. At UNIDO, we expect COP29 to deliver on 3 key issues, which are still major areas where there are gaps. One is climate finance pledge, the transparency of climate action, and the effective implementation of mechanism for transitioning from fossil fuels. In doing so, we see the role of the private sector as crucial. Of course, partnerships, global partnerships are crucial, but private sector has a key role to play, because private sector, as I said before, is an agent for green industrialization. And I was also, when I was reading the documents, I just see that the theme of this session is from good words to good deeds. So I would like to propose 2 good deeds before I conclude my introduction. The first one is the enhancement of the transparency of climate action, starting with first the improved nationally determined contribution, better reporting, and harmonized standards for carbon accounting. This is the first deed. The second one could be the access to clean technologies, because we think that this will accelerate the rate of progress. I would like to, because we do concrete actions, I would like to conclude by giving a concrete example of what we did at UNIDO. We supported the creation of regional centers of excellence for renewable energy and energy efficiency. We also implemented technology centers, including one on hydrogen. So for us, COP29 will be a place to showcase regional and contextual solutions. So I will stop here. Of course, I will be happy to continue this conversation.
So a quick question for you. You talked about public-private working together, that partnership. Can you give a quick example in a minute of one of those that you've worked with?
Yeah. Well, we work on a daily basis with private sector, small and medium enterprises, to foster the development of clean technology, homegrown clean technologies, and also support them to introduce energy and resource efficiency in their operations. But when we talk about fighting against climate change, heavy-end industries are the next frontier. So to date, we have 2 industrial sectors that we would say, industrial product, that are, would say, out of reach, and each of them represents 7 to 8% of the gas emission globally. These are the cement sector and the steel sector.
Yes.
And we need to combine our efforts in this area. Because, unlike the energy sector that the decarbonization is underway, for steel and cement, we have a challenge because the low carbon production technologies are not yet available at scale, and economic incentives for industries are also limited. So to reach the CO2 emissions for these sectors, we require reducing the demand, increasing recycling, and switching to clean energy sources for primary production. And this will be a major endeavor for private sector producers. This is where the private sector come into the play. And I think we should all support them in this path. We are working on the industries to standardize carbon assessment, to establish green public procurement targets, and incentivize investment into low carbon product development. So with this initiative, we advocate for government to set procurement targets for the purchase of decarbonized steel and cement, and the creation of supporting mechanisms and incentives for businesses. So we'll continue our work with partners in the run-up to COP29 to showcase the results and the additional future potential of these efforts.
Thank you very much. Thank you. These public-private partnerships could be really an important addition. I will just add, right now, we have gone public with decarbonization for a company I work with. That's $6 billion of cost. So as we think about industrial movement, there are huge costs associated with decarbonization, so it's something to throw into the pot. Manuma, I'm coming to you next. You have such an interesting background. You were mayor of Penang City. You spent 6 years as executive director of UN Habitat. Can you talk about the crucial role of cities and communities, starting with your big success in COP28 and leveraging this issue?
Thank you so much, Jean, and I would like to say Thank you to the organizer for inviting me. This is my first time in Global Baku Forum. As James mentions that as a mayor, we want to see action. When the ratepayers come to us as a mayor and giving us some challenges, a problem, as a former mayor, I cannot say that, wait, I have to do the survey, I have to do the call for the consultant to look for this. You wait for 2 years for me to come with a solution. No. So I think what we would like to see is that in COP29, to answer Jean's question, I would like to put 3 points and 1 wish list. One of the points is that up to COP28, we have so many outcomes, so many declarations, so many resolutions, so many outcomes. But we want to translate this outcome, this resolution, this declaration into a declared action, into action on the ground, where we would like to see how the government, the national government, the sub-national government, the local government, the city mayors translate the plan, the policies, the strategies, the outcome into action on the ground to give the positive impact to the people that we serve. I think this is very important. And to have this, we need a better multilateral cooperation within the countries, within cities, and at the moment we are facing the 4 Cs. Of course, people say that is the after COVID-19. And we have the climate change, as we are talking today. We have the urban crisis, either it's man-made crisis or natural disaster. And we have the crisis of capital, either is it expertise or finance. And the role of cities here, we really need the 4 Ps: public, private, philanthropies, and people partnership. With all these 4 Cs, 4 Ps, and all these areas, the finance, we need 3 As. Sorry that I use all these A, B, C. We have to be accessible, affordable, and also adequate. And to answer Jane's question, the role of the cities, and this is very, very important because from the statistic, I think all of you knows that cities are the engine of growth. Cities consume 70% of the energy. Cities is the hub of innovation, hub of finance, hub of the education. At the same time, cities also face a lot of challenges and emit 70% of the carbon emission. And also, and at the same time, there are also by 2050, 70% of the global population are in cities. And at the moment, more than 1 billion population live in slum, live in vulnerable situation. So what we would like to see is that without proper water, without proper electricity, without waste and sanitation. So the role of cities here is very, very important. And in COP28, we started in COP27. In COP27 in Glasgow, we managed to have the discussion. And in COP27 in Sharma el-Sheikh, we have the integrated approach to tackle climate change. Because even how many trillion that you pour the funding into the trying to solve the climate emergency, climate change, if you don't link it into proper planning, proper sustainable urbanization, you are pouring the money into for no impact at all. So in Sharma el-Sheikh, we managed to have the ministerial meeting of looking into climate change in more integrated approach, where the Minister of Environment, Minister of Housing, Finance, mayors, NGOs come together and discuss. And at that time, colleagues and the member state endorsed SURGE, Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation. And this SURGE, they have 5 areas of concern. One is building and housing. Second is urban energy. Third is urban waste and consumption. 5th is urban mobility. and fourth is urban mobility, and fifth is urban water. That is at the level of COP27. Then we discuss after that, I want to go to COP28 in Dubai. These are the technical. We need a political support to implement these technical outcomes and at the local level. And at COP28, we have the, I've discussed with Michael Bloomberg, with the COP president of 28, we managed to have the Local Climate Action Summit. Local Climate Action Summit to bring in the role of cities, the role of mayors, the role of communities in tackling the climate change. And at that time, they came out, the member state endorsed what do you call CHAM. CHAM here is that is a coalition of high ambition, multi-level partnership for climate action. CHAM is the political support and SURGE is the technical. And I really hope that CHAM plus SURGE in COP29, we would like to see the result. No more declaration, but we want to see the result in COP29. My ambition is that, my wish list before I stop here, Jane, is that I hope at COP29, the president and the government of Azerbaijan will continue to have this local climate action summit and the ministerial sustainable urbanization meeting to give the platform for the local government, for the national and sub-national government, regional government to share the progress. No more declaration, no more resolution, the progress, the action that taken on the ground on the climate and development. My second wish is that at COP29, I really hope that, and I hope that you will be together with me and will support my proposal, that the COP29 to agree to take into account local level action when quantifying their NDCs and use the urban monitoring framework endorsed by the member state through the UN system in 2022 as the basis for quantification, and a ministerial agreement and endorsement of member state at COP29 will certainly elevate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And of course, WUF 13, World Urban Forum 13, will be in Baku in 2026. So you can see the building block, and at the end of the day, we want to see action, result that is in line with the topic today, from good words to the good deeds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mamuna, I think your reference to CHAMPS and SURGE is a good example of throwing into the COP29 hopper something that's actually been done. We have to build on. We can't start over. We have to build on that good work. So 30 seconds. 30 seconds more here. When we talked, you had a very interesting perspective on the phase out of oil and gas. And you said, don't punish those of us who have oil and gas in our countries, but work with them. Can you give just a 30 seconds of what you said about that? Because I think it's really important, your perspective. I know your country well. I've been there many times. What you meant by that.
Guess me on that.
Okay.
Because we were talking just, yeah. I was thinking is that, yes, there are countries who have abundance of oil and gas. And now we want to phase out fossil fuel. To me, is that Malaysia is also, we have Petronas in Malaysia, and in many other countries we have oil. But for my opinion is that we need revenue, we need finance to go into innovation, to create a new innovation, green infrastructure, green energy, renewable energy. So why don't we make full use the revenue that we got from this oil and gas to finance the innovation, the green energy, the green infrastructure, to build the green infrastructure, because at the moment now, 80% of the existing building, we need to retrofit if we want to go to zero or decarbonize. 80% of the existing building will be there by 2050. Well, we need to retrofit. We need finance. I think my colleague Achim, my friend Achim said about finance. We need finance. Why don't we use this to look into a better way of managing the energy and also the environment? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to come back to that issue. Francisco, I'm coming to you next. All right. You run the International Renewable Energy Agency. How can COP best tackle the blockers to massive renewable energy rollout? What objectives can it set to help remove or reduce the practical barriers? As I'm involved in a number of renewable projects, and they're very difficult to get off the ground. Can you talk about the blockers?
How many hours I have?
I'm sorry?
How many hours I have to respond?
Yeah, you have 4 minutes. And maybe a minute follow-up.
So I think the COP29 main task is to having a path of reality, to reconnect the reality with our commitment. So we can, from COP28, we say transitioning from fossil fuel in line with science. Is correct? Yes. But we are not doing this. So you know that we are very proud that the pledge presented to COP28, so triple renewable energy installed capacity by 2030, is coming by our analysis. But getting this triple, that means 11 terawatt in 2030, meant already starting from 2023, install 1,000 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity early. Because this is the only way to reduce CO2 emission by 43% at 2030 without creating disruption in the market. The fact is that last year, we had a new record of renewable installed capacity. We will be around 480. That is a very good step if you compare with the year 2022. It means 60%, 50% more of installed capacity, but it's less than half of what we needed. So this means that starting from already this year, we need at least to have 1,100 gigawatts of new renewable installed capacity. Yeah. So I think the first task of the COP is connect commitment with reality. And this is because the COP is coming in a very important crossroads, as Achim has already said, that in the next year, we have to present the indices. And the indices should be based on a reality check. And so we, as ARENA, we are really ready to work with the COP presidency to provide this reality check. We have monitoring the energy outcome of COP28 so that we can really put the basis on knowledge for raising the bar of ambition in Baku later this year. It's very important to respond to the second part of your question. First, I wish to clarify that it's not the transition that provides an additional cost. It's the management of energy system that is costly. Yep. Today, in many parts of the world, it's cheaper to build a new renewable energy plant than keeping alive an old fossil fuel plant. So already I can say about the economics, but economics is more just that is the most economical way. It's a way that is more convenient to build a new renewable energy plant instead to keep alive an old plant. And for having all this system staying alive, the subsidies are the way governments are doing. So how we can accelerate the path? We think that we have to find the structural cause that make the deployment of renewable be not speed enough. I just want to give the sense of the scale, why we need to have renewables, because it's the only technologies that may be deployed and the speed, the scale that we need. because we did this concept still alive of the neutrality, technology neutrality. Imagine, last year, we have installed new renewable capacity, electricity power capacity, more than in the last 70 years of nuclear.
Yeah.
Okay? This gives the sense of the scale and the speed how renewables can be deployed. But if we don't afford and overcome the structural barrier as the infrastructure, so renewables has been always said that they are variable, but also gas, oil are variable. If we have not the logistics to put them in the market, they cannot reach the market. And it's the same with renewables. So we need grids that are interconnected, they are flexible, they are balanced also through storage. So infrastructure is the main task, especially in continents like Africa, Asia, also here. What is the first priority is the infrastructure. Without the right infrastructure, we cannot deploy more renewables. As been said about policy, we have to listen to carbon pricing, every measure that maybe play a role. Because in this moment, still the market are designed for fossil fuel, not for renewables. So we need to design the market in a way that fit the goal to sustain the new energy system that is coming. Third is the capacity. I think this has already been mentioned. First, the institutional capacity. No? Still, we have a ministerial for petroleum and gas. We have not too many on energy transition. No? And moving from a centralized energy system to a decentralized one is more complex to manage from the government point of view. So institutional capacity, and I'm closing, also skills. Our university curriculum, our workforce is not ready for it. So there are many companies that want to invest, but they cannot because they are not the infrastructure. There is the market and not design that is in a way that is convenient with them, but also they don't have the skilled workforce for having investment. So in our point of view, these are the three structural causes. And closing, I wish to reiterate that the energy transition is not a cost, it's an investment for a better world.
Excellent. Just a couple of follow-up comments and a quick question back to you. Firming renewable power is an issue that sometimes relies on the continuation of oil and gas because of the intermittency of wind and solar, not hydro. So that continues to be an issue. Infrastructure storage, innovation on batteries continues to be an issue as well. I have a slight technical question for you. It doesn't deserve a technical answer, and I know you're going to tell me I need hours, but I'd like a minute response to it. One of the problems we have right now is a tremendous amount of stranded oil and gas assets. They're all over the world. They're worth trillions of dollars. No one's going to just strand those and give them up. So is it possible that they can be converted? So I'm thinking of LNG terminals converted to green hydrogen terminals, coal plants being converted. Can you just talk about, is that a possibility of a pathway to convert those because people are not willingly going to give them up?
This is largely possible, not 100%, but it's largely possible. Port should be adapt to the new reality. Also the pipelines. Talking about the reality of Europe, for example, we have five pipelines connecting North Africa with Europe. They can bring green hydrogen. There is not much to do. But the fact is that, again, from market design, we have not the demand for this clean energy. So we have not the policies that make the offtake have the size that is needed to make this adjustment possible. So technically, it's absolutely possible to convert largely what is already exists, but we need the right policies to do that. But I wish also to say that we will launch the alarm in Berlin in a few weeks, and we continue to work with the COP presidency, because we have produced a stranded asset, but the worst is that we are continuing to do this.
Excellent.
And this is really unacceptable.
So we want to throw that into the pot because there's trillions of dollars of stranded assets out there that nobody's going to give up, but if we can convert them, it would be interesting. Maria, I'm coming to you, all right? So you heard Achim mention the acronym that is very difficult, the new collective quantified goal, NCQG. I can't even think of a worse acronym or a more difficult one to say. You have been involved in COP for a lot of years in this area. Can you talk for a minute about how COP can best tackle the financing issue once and for all, and the gap between pledges and reality?
Well, thank you, Jean. And I'm thanking you not because you're the moderator, because you're a symbol of the transition you need. Yourself, as an individual, you transitioned away from the fossil fuel sector to the renewable energy world yourself. So I think that's how we would like to see the world in general. And you're, an example that it is possible. Basically, in my 2.5 minutes, I would like to share 3 ideas with you. And I'm going to factor in the money part, no? And you're going to say, why is she talking about geopolitics? Geopolitics matter in climate negotiations. This year, 64 countries will go to elections, and half of the world will vote in 2024. This really matters because climate is not only an environmental issue, it's very much a geopolitical issue. It has gone beyond national borders, and it is not a technical response only. It is a political and economic choice because we are negotiating the right to development. We are negotiating lifestyles. That's why after 28 COPs, emissions continue to increase steadily. And we really need, to think about unchecked growth, unchecked development. Just a matter of context, and Achim brought us also into, how important context is. The second issue is that there is a magical word in climate negotiations which is full of acronyms. It's all about NDCs, IPCCs, and all of that. But for the regular world, when you say means of implementation, that's where things start to become complicated. Because we have the science, we know how bad we're doing and where we are. We have the technologies, and it's feasible and doable, and renewable energies are becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and more accessible. And yet, the word how to get there becomes the critical issue. And the how has to do with the means of implementation. Means of implementation in climate language means the money, the transfer of low carbon technologies, and the capacity building. And that's where things become more complicated because it is how is that we transition to renewables and how we transition, not only on energy, but on our food systems, on our industrial policy. It's a major issue. So after the UAE consensus, the loss and damage fund and the pledge of 700+ million, the global goal on adaptation, huge progress on that front, the idea of transitioning away from fossil fuels, the putting together something that I think it's super smart, which is the Troika working together, the UAE, Azerbaijan, and Brazil together to ensure, continuity and coherence. That's, a big gain in the COP processes. And how is that we go about collectively to this so-called Mission 1.5. So, that's the second part, where we are, how far we have gone. And now the third part is what comes next. And I think that's what your question, Jean. You know, this collective quantified goal, basically this difficult acronym means how much money we need for the transition. And let's be serious about it, because we hear from 2.5 trillion to 9 point something trillion. You know, how is that we are measuring the cost of the transition to a greener, low carbon world economy and societies? And this is one of the major tasks of COP29, you know, to come with the numbers and to come with the pathways. The question is not only how much it will cost, especially for the developing economies, for the vulnerable countries, for the small island developing states. It means, where is the money going to come from? We have signed, I don't know how many commitments and pledges, and the Loss and Damage Fund, and the 100 billion Green Climate Fund, and difficulties for replenishing, et cetera, but exactly what is the total bill of the transition? Who is going to give what? Which countries are in more need than others? And to really, you know, have clarity on what is the arithmetic of climate finance, what are the sources, without double accounting, you know, clarity and accountability, as my neighbor was saying before. The number 2 issue for COP29 is to take stock of the Loss and Damage Fund. There was a big progress setting up the fund, the first pledges, you know, to find a home for the Loss and Damage Fund as well. But here we want to see, you know, the additional money that is, of course, needed. Who is going to bring what? Yet a new opening for new pledges to the Loss and Damage Fund, which is critical for the vulnerable countries, V20 that are now 60 plus countries that are, you know, obviously climate vulnerable countries from the global majority. And the number 3 issue would be a roadmap to 2030. 2030 is around the corner. We have another, you know, progress from COP28 was a global stocktake, which is again a difficult, you know, nomenclature, but it actually means how far we have gone, you know, with the Paris Agreement commitments. And we know that to exactly, you know, grow a map, a roadmap for 2030 is going to be extremely useful when we prepare for COP30, where we are going to see the reality, you know, on what has happened with the national determined contribution, with the national efforts to reduce emissions. That is going to happen in Brazil, but we need, you know, to prepare the ground. So, in basically, perhaps a 4th issue before I close is the issue of the transition on our energy systems, the transition in our industrial policies, the transition in our agriculture and food system dynamics and policy. All of these requires strong multilateralism, which translates into more cooperation, more co-responsibility, more solidarity among countries. The issue of all this equation cannot have progress without understanding the equity part, the justice part, the inclusion part of it. There is a clear divide between the countries that have the low carbon technologies, have the resources, have the capacity. This has to be fully shared, you know, with the countries that are asked to walk fast into the transition, but require, you know, the global solidarity, the common but differentiated responsibilities that the convention states so clearly. And just to close, COP29 counts. It has to count. It is called the finance COP. So we need to deliver on the numbers, the money and the accountability part. But there is also, perhaps, and that's my wish list, Maimuna, is that not only should it be the money COP, the finance COP, but hopefully also the peace COP. And let's hope that by COP29, we can celebrate a final peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That would be a big push. And also the idea that the climate crisis is a challenge, is a difficult challenge, but can be an enabler of peace. We have seen this in the climate talks between China and the United States. We want to see also COP29 to be, the center of a much needed, final peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
and
you.
Over.
Those are great comments. One question, 30 seconds, just an initial reaction. I'm frustrated from the private sector coming into the government sector. How do you put teeth into these pledges? Because there are gaps between pledges and what actually appears. Is it shame and blame? What in your mind, you've been involved in writing these up. Can you just give me your rapid response to that? How do you put teeth into this?
Well, the truth is that there are two worlds, in the climate negotiations and during COPs. The formal intergovernmental negotiations and the part which is extremely important of the pledges, the declarations, the partnerships. In every COP, these declarations multiply. The methane declaration, the declaration on health and climate, many things. I even forget. During COP28, I think we had 15 declarations running parallel to the formal COP. I keep saying...
Isn't that a problem?
Can be a problem, but also an opportunity, because declarations are faster than intergovernmental negotiations. The key issue is to connect the two. The key issue is to establish follow-up and accountability mechanisms for these declarations and make sure that the declarations feed into the wealth of the intergovernmental negotiations.
Okay.
In just one more word to say, we need to start thinking about how to reform and improve the working methods of Conference of the Parties. It has become a little bit unmanageable, and I think that we need to be serious about mainstreaming the way we do business at COP.
Great. Accountabilities, let's remember that word, because I like to come back to that. Hakim, coming to you next. You have just a long history of dealing with these issues. For someone who you've heard these comments in the House, and we're going to come to Alok and the minister in a minute. You've heard all these comments. You've witnessed many COPs. You were co-president of Paris. Can you just give me your observations on how converting all of this into action, what the obstacles might be?
It's a very difficult exercise because you have so outstanding speakers. These people around this panel are also very involved with all the COPs, and I know most of them. But I agree with everything which was said, and I will react on what you said, my friend. You said that a COP is a geopolitical COP. But I will say, I remember the Philippine prime ministers saying, each time I'm coming to a COP, I have a feeling to negotiate that we are negotiating for whom will live and whom will die. So a COP, it's not only a geopolitical tool. This is a life. This is humanity. We are talking about people future, about humanity future. I agree with everything that was said by Achim. Yes, we did an extraordinary job since 1995, We created the dual COP. Now everybody is on board. Lima, Paris, I'm looking at Emmanuel, did an amazing job involving business, private companies. I created the Marrakesh Partnership, gathering everybody around the same table, policymakers, because let me tell you something, we cannot change anything if the policies are not aligned with the future we want to give to this planet. You cannot continue putting $1 trillion subsidies for fossil fuel, and this is the only amount spent in 2022, $1 trillion, 2022, and you talk about renewable. How can we create a competitive industry when we are subsidizing fossil fuel in this way? Now, let me put everybody in perspective. Remember this figure, 43%. This is the amount of CO2 emissions we should reduce in 2030, tomorrow, 2030, 43%. Remember again, the last stock take in September 2022 said that we are far away from the objective of 1.5 degrees C. Remember again, 2023 was the hottest year in record humanity has withstood. So, since the Paris Agreement, what we are doing? Pledges, announcements, dynamic, very good. I feel ashamed because before each COP, we have the obligation to be optimism. But today, we have the obligation to be realistic and pragmatic. And the reality, we are not doing well. The good news, the technology exists. And Francesco told you, even renewable can be less expensive than a coal industry or oil industry. But the problem that we are not connecting the reality, I agree with Francisco, with the reality with the business. So what we need, and you are right, we need to know who is emitting what. Everybody is talking about finance. Yes, finance is important. The most important thing is CO2 emissions. The least we emit CO2, the least we need the help of the North. The more we mitigate climate change, the least we need to adapt, the least we need money in the climate disaster finance, the loss and damage finance, and we need money. But the problem is that we are continuing to emit CO2 emissions without any accountability, and I agree that this is the COP to deliver on MRV transparency mechanism. And nobody is saying what? Okay, what I'm saying we don't need solidarity. We need responsibility. We need that the people who are responsible for 80% of the CO2 emissions are putting on the table 80% of the money and 80% of the solutions. This is justice. You are talking about phasing out coal and fossil fuel. Yes, definitely. And your agency said that we need to keep under the ground more than 90% of coal and more than 50% of oil and gas. But who is going to keep under the ground the coal and the gas and oil? The most vulnerable or the developed world? How are we going to go far and to phase out fossil fuel in a fair and transparent way? So, please, this COP, which is the COP of finance, We want Azerbaijan to look at the most vulnerable and to be just pushing for a fair transition and to push the responsible for the pollution to put the money on the table instead of $1 trillion for subsidies. Keep the promise of the 100 million for the Paris Agreement for mitigation. Instead of the $1 trillion spent only and $600 billion spent every year to subsidize fossil fuel, put the money on loss and damage because 700 million is peanut. And I will end my last point, and I agree with Maimouna. Everything. We need to transform the Paris Agreement to a citizenship agreement because this is a global transformation. And Maimouna is right. 80% of the decisions taken on climate are in territories. And what we are not doing now, we are not linking INDC with territories. So what we need to do is to launch during COP29 what we call LDC, local determined contribution, that will be the sum of these local contributions will be the NDCs. And then we will move on and we will reach 1.5.
Great, thank you so much. I love the concept of the LDCs, the locally determined contributions. I think it's a great mix of Maimouna and your comments. One thing I just want to reinforce that you said, you read, piles, I have stacks on my desk of reports, and there are lots of metrics, but there is really one simple metric in this whole mess, right? Do emissions go down or don't they? And that's what you underscored. Do they go down or don't they? So with that, thank you so much, Hakima. Let me move on to Sir Alok Sharma. You have a very unique perspective. You were the president of COP26. You've watched the step function from COP26 to 27 to 28 and now 29. When the UK took on the COP26 presidency, only 30% of world economic activity was covered by net zero target, and that is now over 90%. So what key lessons can you put out for this group to understand? But let me add one late breaking piece of news. Probably some of you have saw this morning. It came out last night. Shell issued a press release that the company is lowering its emissions reduction targets from 20% to 15 to 20% by 2030, and it's scrapping its emissions reduction targets by 45%. So I have a lot to say about that, but I'd like to turn it over to Sir Sharma to give us his key learnings about the lessons over the time and maybe a reaction to what Shell has done.
Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you to the Global Baku Forum organizers for inviting all of us. Can I just take you back, friends, to 2.5 years ago at COP26 in Glasgow? And you'll recall that the world was in the grip of COVID. All our economies, balance sheets were hugely stretched because of the support we rightly had to provide to businesses and to individuals in our countries. And of course, we had a worsening geopolitics, which unfortunately got a lot worse at the beginning of 2022. And yet, despite this, we were able to get almost 200 countries to come together and forge the Glasgow Climate Pact. Now, what did that achieve? Jean's just outlined one of the things we managed to get from less than 30% of the global economy to over 90% covered by a net zero target. Just about every single G20 country signed up. We managed to get commitments to double the amount of adaptation finance to support developing nations from the donor countries. We had increases in emission reduction targets. We saw for the very first time in 26 COPs agreement on phase down of coal. I mean, it is remarkable, we're talking about fossil fuels here, that it took us 26 COPs for the first time ever to get language on fossil fuels into a COP agreement. And at the end of all of this, the International Energy Agency totted up the commitments that had been made. And it said that if all the commitments, particularly those net zero commitments, were made and delivered, we would be heading towards 1.8 degrees of global warming above pre-industrial levels. So not 1.5, 1.8. But at the time, I said this was a fragile win. And I repeat that now. It was a fragile win because commitments are one thing, delivering on the commitments is another. So then we move forward to Sharm el-Sheikh with COP27, reiterating many of the commitments made at COP26, and then we had the historical agreement on the Loss and Damage Fund. And then you move forward to Dubai, COP28, money being deployed for the Loss and Damage Fund, a whole range of actions agreed, and actually building on what we started at COP26 with a big push from the business community as well, for the first time coming together at these COPs and making pledges. But of course, the biggest achievement, I think, of COP28 was, again, that commitment from countries to phase out, to move away, transition away from fossil fuels in energy systems. It didn't go as far as many of us wanted, which is the phase out of fossil fuels, but I do believe it spelt the end, certainly the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. But then let's just inject a bit of reality into all of this, because you've heard this from our friends on the panel. Countries make commitments. Businesses make commitments. Sometimes they go back on the commitments they've made. But the reality is that the climate change is continuing to advance. We've heard last year was the warmest year on record. We're heading towards, well, certainly we're at already 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And so the key issue for me here, there are three learnings that I think we need to take away. The first is that actually, despite all the frustrations, and Jean, you referred to this at the start, these processes do work. Countries do come together because they understand it is in their collective self-interest to act, because they know that climate change does not recognize borders. But the second point, which has been made by many panelists here, is that we are just not going fast enough. We're making these pledges, we have the technology, we're not delivering fast enough. And we do need to cut emissions by over 40% over the next 6 years if you're going to have any hope of keeping alive the 1.5 degree target. And the third is finance. Now, there's a big discussion that goes on about the 100 billion, and I think that's now being delivered. Obviously, our friends here in Azerbaijan have to deliver that next target. But friends, that's not going to be enough, right? We're talking about $125 trillion to transform the world economy to net zero. That is going to need money deployed from the private sector. And in Glasgow, we got $130 trillion of private sector money committed to go to net zero in the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. But that money isn't flowing. And so I think one of the challenges for COP29 is going to be not just on the quantified goal, but how do you ensure that those billions from the private sector are actually turning into the trillions? Because unless we do that, I'm afraid we're going to be in an incredibly difficult position going forward. The final thing I want to say is that this is going to be a historic COP. Every COP is different. And I don't accept what people say, we move from one COP to a smaller COP. No, every COP is important. It builds on the last one. That's what we have seen. I was in Brazil a couple of weeks ago talking to the Brazilian government about COP30 and their G20. And I think having this troika working together on implementation, but then also ensuring that we have actions coming through at COP29 will be really important. So, Minister, this is going to be your country's moment in history. Please make it count for the world.
Thank you. Excellent. Do you have a comment about Shell? Do you have a comment about Shell's announcement last night that they're going backwards on their emissions commitment?
Well, look, I mean, this applies as much to countries as it does to companies. If you make commitments, you need to stick with them. And so, of course, I'm disappointed. I'm hugely disappointed that we are seeing people renege on the commitments that they're making. And the one point I think that is really important here is that just imagine if in every decision, every financial decision that was made by corporates, by countries, we actually priced in climate risk, we would solve this issue basically overnight. We've heard this about the $1 trillion. I mean, if there's $1 trillion going to fossil fuel subsidies, why is no one thinking of the impact of that, of the climate risk as a result of that money going in? That's what I would like to see, is for our international system, the financial system, to actually think again and ensure that climate risk is priced into every single decision that we make.
I think that's an excellent comment to bring it in. And I know that number is more than $1 trillion of subsidies. I can just speak for my own country. So it's big, and we have to deal with it. Accountabilities, we just need to stamp that as a key issue. Thank you very much for that. Turning to you, Minister. You're in the cleanup batter position here. Against this backdrop, we have COP29 presidency. Congratulations on taking on the CEO role. Can you outline for us how you intend to set the highest level of ambition, quote, that's out there, and what would a successful COP look like from your perspective?
Madam Chair, thank you so much for giving me the last word, but also making me feel special about it, saying that this is the most important part of it. And I greet Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Azerbaijan, and thank organizers for this. We are really honored to take the banner of climate negotiations from the international community. Notwithstanding the fact that on this banner, big letters, it's written crisis, but we are also focusing on the other side of the banner, which also talks about solutions, and this is more about solutions, definitely. This process, as my colleagues very clearly stated, and as you very well know, so COP29 will be about finance. And we are also excited to see how Baku, Azerbaijan, and finance issue is basically becoming a platform that unites COP28's global stocktake and COP30's ratcheted up NDCs. So this is really a big and special moment that we want to deliver on. What personally amazes me, and what you could surmise so far from the speeches of the distinguished speakers, is that, to me, this climate awareness started with international civil society, scientific society, epistemic society, if you like. And then by early 90s, you see the joining to this group of states, the most important political actors of the modern era, nation states, are joining to this group. And I think what we are seeing in the last years is how market forces, as my colleagues are talking about the cost of mitigation and adaptation, getting closer to market prices, market equilibrium prices. I think this is really the most important event that is happening. That is, all three pillars of international community, civil society, states, and now market forces. And don't underestimate market forces. I am an admirer of Polanyi, and their coming will be very significant. So as we are seeing this combination of three forces, I think the finance issue and this new collective quantified goal issue becomes all the more important, because as has been said over and over, talks about quantity, but also it's about quality. It's about how you are placing, how you are modifying, and finding these relevant niches within these three pillars so that you can really deliver and bring about action in this process. And in that sense, also, we are welcoming, as was expressed, this Troika dialogue between three COP presidencies. This is novelty which we believe, and we are already feeling the help of this process. Regarding COP29, as you know, this negotiation track is underway. Our negotiating team is all around the world, and they are starting their processes together with UNFCCC Secretariat. The other track, which is about presidential action agenda and the vision of the presidency, we are working very intensively on that, and I believe that internal discussions are reaching their final moment, and probably in several weeks' time, we are going to go public with those initiatives that we have. And there are several organizing principles, basically, that we look at as we put together different elements of this action agenda. One of those organizing principles is really, and perhaps the most important one, is listening, as also Madam Chair made me do this time, right? This is really important because you are basically, COP presidency is about being primus inter pares. You are not there to impose your agenda. You are about this is about listening and carrying the banner for 1 year of this international process. And therefore, we are very carefully doing that. The second, and not by the order of importance, organizing principle would be how do you manage continuity and also legacy issues, right? So things that have started, you want to be part of that process. You have to be part of that process to deliver on those issues, to speed up those issues, to concretize those issues, but you also want to have some legacy. So this is Azerbaijan, this is Baku, and I think the clever organization of COP processes is about this. You have your own interest. There's self-interest about really making sure that you have next best historic COP, right? So we also therefore think about how we will be continuing, but also adding our own to the processes. And when I go to concrete item agendas that we are discussing, then I think the issue will be clearer. Third issue is about localization and globalization. So how do you make sure that the issues you put forward have some local traction, but also applied globally, right? You have to galvanize and inspire your local population, especially youth, to me, but at the same time, people should be able to relate to what you are doing all over the world. So that's also a very important aspect. And the fourth principle would be, as my colleagues have been mentioning very correctly, we have seen this inflation of an explosion of initiatives, right? And they stop and end. I think they are valuable, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we are a little bit pickier, so we have fewer issues, and this is what you are going to be feeling this time in a comparative perspective. Probably we won't have that many issues, but we have fewer issues, and we are going to be trying to deep dive into those issues. So along these lines, what are certain ideas that we are already entertaining? I believe that one issue that we will be definitely focusing on will be about Article 6, about carbon trading, because this is very novel and very significant mechanism that is about technology transfer and transfer of financial resources between Global South and Global North. And we should make best of that. And as, again, finance is the main topic of today, of this year's climate talks, finance will be part and parcel of every initiative in the presidential action agenda. And we believe that with its a lot of wells, depleted wells, and very significant reforestation efforts, Azerbaijan could play a very significant role in this carbon trading schemes. Another issue, and probably those three major initiatives that we saw in COP28, I would start with global renewables and energy efficiency pledge, which we signed up to. It's about tripling and doubling. And I think, again, we will continue and see how we can speed up the process, maybe add some concreteness to it. But at the same time, we are thinking about adding a third very significant element, which is about grid-scale storage. And grid-scale storage is really holy grail of renewable energy. If you want to eventually make it a reality, because all the costs, there are hidden costs. I talk about market forces, and I always hear Irina about and read very carefully their reports about how the price is coming down to compete on a market base, but at the same time, there are hidden costs of renewable energy. I mean, you need huge investments to your grids. You need battery storage systems, right? So these issues need to be resolved, and we believe that that could be, again, in terms of continuity and change, continuity and legacy, that would be one point. We're also very carefully analyzing the other two major initiatives, one being about oil and gas decarbonization charter, to which our SOCAR state oil company signed up to, and industrial transition accelerator. We believe that there are also issues that could be, again, delivered, could be categorized, added more concreteness to, and at the same time, maybe qualitatively add additional elements to inspire and, again, to move forward. Some other issues that we believe could be really significant, one of them would be, for instance, about green corridors. We like that idea. Azerbaijan is, again, we like saying that we are at the crossroads of north and south, east and west, literally speaking, and in many other senses. And we are really good in terms of building corridors, right? In terms of transportation, energy corridors, the last of which was built, Southern Gas Corridor, which is about natural gas, really becoming part of the energy transition system. But right now, we are building and planning to build this green corridor, which is the next third and logical step that we are taking in the saga of corridors. We are planning to connect Caspian Sea's immense offshore wind resources all the way to Georgia, through Black Sea, to Romania and Hungary. And why this is important? Well, because grids currently, and as you very well know, one of the major issues in incorporating renewable energy is grid stability. Especially smaller grids like the grid in Azerbaijan. They are unable to take on renewable energy beyond a certain point because it creates instabilities and basically messes up the entire system, resulting in blackouts, very costly blackouts. But one fast solution to that could be interconnections. Interconnections immediately increase your grid size. And bigger you are, less susceptible you are to these variations in intermittency, regarding intermittency of renewable sources. So this is what we are planning. And also, what we are encouraged about is that our Central Asian brothers also thinking about connecting Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to Azerbaijan through Trans-Caspian cable line, and also Turkmenistan is thinking about that. And as we are starting the feasibility study, what surprised us was that the HVDC cables, which are important in terms of efficiency in long distances, the market is not there yet in terms of supply side. Demand side, if you start placing orders today, it takes years before you can get those cables that you need. So we believe that this is a very nice area where states and non-state actors, corporations could get together with a certain financial package and deliver something that could have global traction in terms of solving these issues. And another thing that really...
We need to wrap up.
Okay, another thing that really inspires us about these green corridors is that we are taking two routes, one in northern direction, but another direction would be from mainland Azerbaijan to Azerbaijani exclave of Nakhchivan, and to Turkey, and then to European countries. And if you looked at that connection, then from mainland Azerbaijan to reach Nakhchivan, you have to go, there are alternatives, but one of them is Armenia. And there have been a lot of debates in 1990s that with other energy projects we had, people were talking about peace dividend, how Armenia could have joined. As you know, liberal theory says that interdependence brings about peace.
We want to have 1 minute left for everybody to wrap up, so if we can wrap up.
And we believe that this kind of connection, and maybe there will be other elements of peace and climate, but this concrete example could be now a chance for the third time to bring our interests together, to create interdependencies, and therefore pave the way for long-awaited sustainable peace.
Thank you very much. a quick reaction, and we're going to take one more minute of your time, and I'm going to come to all of you and ask you the top thing, the COP29. You got 5 seconds to answer it. The top thing you want to get out of COP29. But I do want to react to a couple things that you said, Minister. First of all, the idea of prioritizing a lot of things is really important, because we can have a lot of things we're focused on, but if we don't get them on the ground, they really don't count. And if you missed it or not, these cables mean we move green electrons as well as green molecules, and that's huge, because what cabling does, it really allows us to have an infrastructure that is truly green. And I loved your localization versus globalization, because it really connects a lot of the comments here. All right, so I'm going to ask, we're right on time right now, but I'm going to take 1 minute. I'm going to ask each of our panelists the one thing that you'd like to see happen out of COP29. I'll start while your brains are sorting through the massive amount of information in there. From my perspective, I'd like us to scrap 2050 and make 2030 what we really need to focus on. Make people make commitments. They actually have to live to deliver. Because 2050 turn into promises. They're easy. We need people to really make commitments. Francesco, one thing.
As I say, reconnect reality with commitment. This should be the cup of truth on this respect. And when reacting to what the CEO of COP is saying...
You get 15, you got 7 seconds, so...
Ask in the reform of the multilateral financial system that the multilateral financial system has as a priority provide funding for the infrastructure that we need to make the grid to be interconnected, flexible, and balanced.
Excellent. Hakima.
I will say that as the war, climate is killing, and it will take a political decision to decide to stop the war. It will take generations and generations to cope and to mitigate climate change. I hope that during COP29, people, our leaders, will come to COP29 and announce that their priority is not to win the war, but to win the battle of climate change.
Okay, great.
Second, last point.
All right.
40% of the world population will vote this year, and I hope that they will not vote for someone who will withdraw from the Paris Agreement.
Mamuna, one thing.
Localization and local action. I'm really looking forward to seeing the local government and their actions are taken seriously into account by member states at COP29 meeting.
Great. Maria.
Thank you.
2 headlines. Every COP counts. This hopefully will be the COP of peace and accountability, and a balance between continuity and legacy.
Fatou.
I would say transparency, implementation mechanism, and accountability.
Excellent. Excellent.
Turbocharge finance flows.
Excellent. Minister, one thing.
We are expected to deliver, and that's what we are going to do.
Great. Achim, wrap it up.
Climate change has become a threat to national security everywhere. Can we now transform it into a development opportunity everywhere? And this is why in UNDP we have made a commitment larger than ever before, support 125 countries to get climate change into their national development as an opportunity. And that's what we're working on.
Excellent. Now, everyone, because we have so many panelists, we haven't been able to engage the audience, but we are all around. You should grab us all, ask any question that you want, but thank you for your patience. Really well done. Great to have you all on a panel.